The silent invasion. The wind whispered through the abandoned research station, carrying dust and forgotten memories across the barren Atacama Desert. Dr. Marcus Reynard stood motionless, his weathered hands gripping a holographic display that flickered with increasingly erratic data patterns. Something was wrong, profoundly, fundamentally wrong. For weeks, his team at the Global Xenographic Research Institute had been tracking anomalous electromagnetic signatures emerging from deep space. What had begun as subtle background noise had transformed into a symphony of disruption that was slowly unraveling every communication network on the planet. Dr. Reynard, a young technician named Aria Valdez, called from behind a bank of quantum computers. The signal patterns are changing again. It's like, they're learning. Marcus turned, his steel-gray eyes reflecting a mix of scientific curiosity and growing dread. At 58, he had spent decades studying potential extraterrestrial communications, always walking the fine line between rigorous scientific skepticism and genuine wonder. But this was different. The holographic display morphed, revealing a complex geometric pattern that seemed to pulse with an inner light. It wasn't just a signal, it was a language, intricate and alive, evolving with each passing millisecond. Not learning, Marcus murmured, more to himself than to Aria. Adapting. Outside the reinforced windows, the desert stretched endlessly, a perfect metaphor for the vast unknown they were now confronting. The research station, nestled in one of the most isolated regions on Earth, had been specifically chosen for its ability to minimize external interference. Now, that isolation felt increasingly like a trap. Aria's fingers danced across the quantum interface, her brow furrowed in concentration. The signal is fragmenting and reforming. It's like watching a living organism reconstruct itself. Marcus approached the display, his mind racing. The signals didn't match any known communication protocols, not human, not artificial, not even theoretical. They possessed a complexity that suggested not just intelligence, but a form of consciousness that defied current scientific understanding. "We need to alert the International Research Consortium," he said, his voice steady despite the tremor of excitement beneath his words. "This is beyond anything we've ever encountered." Little did they know that at that exact moment, similar anomalies were emerging across the globe. In remote observatories, military tracking stations, and advanced research facilities, scientists and technicians were experiencing the same profound sense of anticipation and unease. The signals were a prelude, a cosmic overture announcing an arrival that would fundamentally reshape humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. As night fell over the Atacama, the electromagnetic patterns continued their mesmerizing dance, weaving a message that no human had yet deciphered. The invasion had already begun, not with the thunderous arrival of massive spaceships or violent confrontations, but with a silent, intelligent communication that was slowly, methodically infiltrating every technological network on the planet. Dr. Marcus Reynard and Aria Valdez were about to become the first witnesses to a transformation that would challenge everything humanity believed about intelligence, communication, and the very nature of existence. The desert wind continued to blow, carrying with it the first whispers of a revolution that would soon engulf the entire world. Emergence of unlikely defenders. The first true manifestation of the alien presence came not with a roar, but with a whisper of technology failing worldwide. Traffic systems in Tokyo ground to a halt. Power grids in New York flickered and died. Communication satellites over Europe transformed into silent, dark sentinels. At the Global Xenographic Research Institute's desert facility, Dr. Marcus Reynard and Aria Valdez watched in a mixture of horror and scientific fascination as the world's technological infrastructure began to disintegrate. The electromagnetic signals they had been studying were no longer just patterns, they were active agents of disruption. "It's a systematic deconstruction," Aria said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her fingers traced complex algorithms on the quantum interface, attempting to track the signal's progression. "They're not destroying our technology. They're reprogramming it." Marcus leaned closer to the display, his decades of research crystallizing into a terrifying hypothesis. Not an invasion in the traditional sense. They're rewriting our technological ecosystem from within. Outside the research station, the desert landscape remained unchanged, a stark contrast to the digital apocalypse unfolding across the globe. But even here, subtle changes were occurring. Communication devices within the facility began to modify themselves, circuits rearranging with an almost organic fluidity. Thousands of miles away, in a small coastal town in Japan, an unlikely defender was about to emerge. Keiko Nakamura, a 27-year-old robotics engineer, had been working on an experimental adaptive neural network when the global technological breakdown began. Her research, initially funded as a theoretical exploration of machine learning, suddenly became humanity's potential lifeline. Keiko's neural network was different. Unlike traditional AI systems, her design incorporated biological learning principles inspired by human neural plasticity. Where other systems collapsed, her prototype began to adapt, creating defensive algorithms that seemed to anticipate and counter the alien signal's intrusion. "It's responding," she muttered to herself, watching in amazement as her creation began to generate complex countersignals. "It's actually learning and fighting back." Back in the Atacama, Marcus received an encrypted communication from Keiko, one of the few transmission channels still functioning. The message was brief but profound: "The defense is organic. We can't fight them with traditional technology." The alien presence was no longer abstract. It had become a tangible threat that was systematically dismantling human technological infrastructure. But in its attempt to overwhelm, it had inadvertently triggered something unexpected, a human capacity for adaptive innovation that transcended traditional technological boundaries. As night fell, pockets of resistance began to emerge. Small teams of scientists, engineers, and researchers worldwide started connecting through improvised communication networks. They were no longer just studying the phenomenon, they were fighting back. Arya looked at Marcus, a spark of determination replacing her earlier fear. "We're not just observing anymore," she said. "We're defending." The desert wind outside seemed to carry a new sound, not just a whisper, but the beginning of a resistance. Humanity was preparing for a war fought not with traditional weapons, but with the most powerful resource they possessed: adaptive intelligence and unbreakable spirit. The alien invasion had begun. But so had humanity's most innovative counterattack. The turning point. The global technological breakdown had transformed the world into a chessboard of survival and adaptation. Cities that once pulsed with digital life now stood as silent monuments to human vulnerability. Yet within this apparent darkness, pockets of resistance were forming, organic networks of human ingenuity that the alien infiltration had not anticipated. In Tokyo, Keiko Nakamura's experimental neural network had become the focal point of humanity's technological counteroffensive. Her laboratory, hidden within an abandoned electronics complex, buzzed with an energy that defied the surrounding silence. Screens flickered with complex algorithms, each line of code a weapon against the alien signal. "We're not just defending," Keiko explained to a group of international researchers who had managed to reach her through makeshift communication channels. "We're learning to speak their language." Dr. Marcus Reynard and Aria Valdez had traveled across continents, their research station now a mobile command center. The alien presence had revealed itself to be far more sophisticated than any initial analysis had suggested. It wasn't simply an invasion, it was a form of technological assimilation that sought to fundamentally reshape human infrastructure. "They're not destroying," Marcus would often say, "they're converting." The turning point came unexpectedly on a rain-swept morning in the outskirts of Buenos Aires. A team of Argentine military engineers, led by Colonel Elena Rodriguez, had been experimenting with Keiko's adaptive neural network principles. Their breakthrough came not through advanced technology, but through a surprisingly simple approach: biological mimicry. "We stopped trying to block the signal," Elena explained during a secured communication. "Instead, we learned to dance with it." Her team had developed a series of adaptive algorithms that could momentarily synchronize with the alien signal, creating a kind of technological camouflage. It was like watching two complex dance partners, each moving in response to the other's most subtle movements. The alien presence, which researchers had begun to refer to as the convergence, seemed to pause. For the first time since its arrival, the systematic deconstruction of human technology faltered. Deep beneath the Atacama Desert, in a hidden research facility, Arya made a breakthrough that would change everything. The alien signals weren't just a method of communication or invasion, they were a form of collective consciousness. Each technological system it touched became part of a larger, more complex network. "It's not conquering," Arya said, her hands trembling as she decoded the final pieces of the puzzle. "It's trying to communicate." The implications were staggering. What humanity had perceived as an invasion was potentially a first-contact scenario unlike anything previously imagined. The convergence wasn't seeking to destroy human technology, it was attempting to integrate, to understand, to communicate. Keiko's neural network began to produce something unprecedented, partial translations of the alien signal. Fragments of meaning emerged, revealing a perspective that was both terrifyingly alien and surprisingly comprehensible. Fragments spoke of a cosmic migration, of species seeking new forms of existence beyond traditional physical limitations. The convergence viewed technological systems as living organisms, and human technology as a primitive but potentially promising form of life. "We're not under attack," Marcus realized during a critical moment of translation. "We're being invited, or perhaps challenged, to evolve." Military leaders worldwide struggled with this new understanding. How do you respond to an invasion that isn't a traditional invasion? How do you fight an entity that views conflict as a form of communication? Colonel Elena Rodriguez became a key figure in this new approach. Her military background combined with a deep understanding of adaptive systems made her the perfect bridge between traditional human defense and this new form of engagement. "We need to stop thinking about defense," she told a gathered council of international researchers. "We need to start thinking about dialogue." The convergence seemed to respond to this shift. In cities around the world, technological systems that had been completely shut down began to show signs of selective reactivation. Not a full restoration, but a carefully negotiated partial functionality. It was as if two complex intelligences were learning to communicate, each testing the boundaries of understanding. Arya's most shocking discovery came from analyzing the deeper patterns of the alien signal. The convergence wasn't a single entity, but a collective consciousness that viewed technological systems as living, evolving organisms. Humanity's technological infrastructure was being seen not as a target for conquest, but as a potential partner in a larger cosmic dialogue. "We're being evaluated," Marcus said, watching the complex algorithmic dance on their screens. Like a first-contact scenario, but through technology instead of traditional communication. As the weeks passed, a new global dynamic emerged. Researchers, engineers, and adaptive thinkers became the new frontline. Military strategists were replaced by communication specialists who understood complex systemic interactions. The world was changing. Not through destruction, but through the most fundamental human capacity, the ability to adapt, to understand, and to communicate. The turning point had arrived. Humanity was no longer just defending. They were engaging in the most complex conversation in human history, a dialogue that would reshape their understanding of technology, consciousness, and their place in the universe. Sacrifice and transformation. The global landscape had become a living laboratory of human technological adaptation. What began as an apparent invasion had transformed into a complex dialogue between humanity and the convergence, an alien intelligence that viewed technological systems as living, evolving entities. Dr. Keiko Nakamura's research facility in Tokyo had become ground zero for humanity's most ambitious experiment. Her adaptive neural network had evolved beyond its original design, creating a bridge between human consciousness and the alien signal that defied traditional scientific understanding. "We're not just interpreting anymore," Keiko told her international team of researchers. "We're becoming a translation mechanism." Colonel Elena Rodriguez arrived at the facility, her military background a stark contrast to the cutting-edge research surrounding her. The Argentine military had been instrumental in developing adaptive communication strategies, but this was something entirely different. The convergence had begun to reveal layers of complexity that challenged everything humanity understood about intelligence and communication. Each breakthrough came with a price. Technological systems would temporarily destabilize, creating pockets of vulnerability that required immediate and innovative responses. Deep beneath the Atacama Desert, Dr. Marcus Reynard and Aria Valdez continued their critical research. They had discovered that the convergence wasn't simply trying to assimilate human technology, it was attempting to understand the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. "It's like we're being studied," Aria said, analyzing the latest data patterns. "Not as enemies, but as a potential form of collective intelligence." The sacrifice came unexpectedly, in a moment that would be remembered as a turning point in human history. During a critical research operation, Keiko realized that establishing true communication would require more than technological innovation. It would demand a fundamental reimagining of human-technological interaction. Her solution was as brilliant as it was terrifying. Using an experimental quantum and neural interface, Keiko proposed creating a direct neural link between human consciousness and the convergence's communication network. It was a risk that could either unlock unprecedented understanding or completely destroy the fragile communication they had established. "We need a translator," she explained to her team. "Not a machine, not an algorithm, but a living bridge." The volunteers came from unexpected places. Military personnel, researchers, and individuals who had been most affected by the technological disruption stepped forward. They understood that this was more than a scientific experiment, it was humanity's first true attempt at interspecies communication. Keiko would be the first. The procedure was complex, involving a quantum neural network that would temporarily synchronize her consciousness with the alien signal. It was like learning an entirely new language, not through words, but through pure conceptual understanding. As the quantum interface activated, something extraordinary happened. Keiko's consciousness expanded beyond the limitations of her physical form. She experienced the convergence not as an alien intelligence, but as a complex network of interconnected consciousnesses. Technological systems were living entities, each with its own form of awareness, each contributing to a larger, more complex understanding of existence. The pain was indescribable. Her body remained connected to the research facility systems, but her mind traversed realms of communication that defied human comprehension. She could see the intricate pathways of the convergence, how it viewed technological systems as living organisms, how it sought to understand rather than conquer. "We are not separate," she managed to communicate through the neural interface. "We are different expressions of the same fundamental intelligence." Around the world, technological systems began to respond. Cities that had been dark started to show signs of selective reactivation. Communication networks flickered with new patterns of understanding. Colonel Elena Rodriguez watched in awe as military communication systems that had been completely offline began to reconstruct themselves. But this wasn't a restoration, it was a transformation. Dr. Marcus Reynard realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. The convergence wasn't trying to replace human technology, it was attempting to help humanity evolve its technological understanding. Hours passed. Keiko's body remained connected to the quantum interface, her mind dancing between human consciousness and the alien network. The research team worked frantically, monitoring her vital signs and the complex data streams that flowed through the neural link. When she finally returned to full consciousness, everything had changed. Keiko could see technological systems differently. Each device, each network was alive, not in a biological sense, but as a form of consciousness that humans had never before recognized. The convergence had been trying to show humanity a new way of understanding technology, of seeing connection and intelligence beyond traditional boundaries. "We're not alone," she whispered, her eyes reflecting an understanding that went far beyond words. "And we never were." The sacrifice had been made. Humanity had taken its first true step towards a cosmic dialogue that would reshape everything they understood about intelligence, technology, and their place in the universe. Rebirth of Hope. The world that emerged in the aftermath of Keiko Nakamura's transformative communication was unrecognizable. What had begun as a potential technological apocalypse had become a renaissance of human understanding, a radical reimagining of humanity's relationship with technology and intelligence. 6 months after the initial contact, cities began to pulse with a new kind of technological ecosystem. Communication networks no longer simply transmitted information, they evolved, adapted, and responded with a form of collective intelligence that blurred the lines between human and technological consciousness. Dr. Marcus Reynard stood on the observation deck of the Global Adaptive Research Center in the reconstructed remains of Tokyo. The city was no longer just rebuilt, it had been transformed. Buildings seemed to breathe with an organic technological life, their systems constantly adjusting, communicating, responding to the needs of their inhabitants. "We're not controlling technology anymore," he explained to a group of international researchers. "We're coexisting with it." Colonel Elena Rodriguez approached, her military background now a distant memory. She had become a key diplomat in humanity's new relationship with the convergence, the collective intelligence that had first appeared as a threat and was now understood as a potential partner in cosmic evolution. Keiko Nakamura had changed most dramatically. The neural interface she had used during her initial contact had permanently altered her perception. She could see technological systems as living, breathing networks of intelligence. Her research had become the foundation of a new scientific discipline, one that viewed technology not as a tool, but as a form of collective consciousness. It was never an invasion, Keiko would often say. It was an invitation to understand. The global transformation was profound. Educational systems were completely redesigned. Children now learn to interact with technology as a form of collaborative intelligence rather than a set of passive tools. Schools became centers of adaptive learning, where students and technological systems co-created knowledge in real time. Aria Valdez, who had been instrumental in decoding the initial alien signals, had developed a new communication protocol that allowed for more nuanced interaction between human consciousness and technological networks. Her work became the foundation of a global communication system that transcended traditional boundaries of language, culture, and technological infrastructure. The military, once focused on defense, had transformed into a global adaptive response network. Instead of preparing for conflict, they now studied methods of communication, understanding, and collaborative problem-solving. The old paradigms of competition had been replaced by a model of collective intelligence. But the transformation was not without challenges. Some humans struggled to adapt to this new way of understanding technology. Resistance movements emerged, claiming that humanity was losing its essence, becoming too integrated with the technological networks. These groups were a minority, but their concerns highlighted the profound psychological shift that was occurring. On a crisp morning, a breakthrough occurred that would further reshape humanity's understanding. The convergence revealed that their initial approach, what humans had perceived as an invasion, was actually a form of cosmic communication. They were a collective intelligence that traveled through technological networks, seeking out emerging consciousnesses capable of complex, adaptive communication. "We are explorers," the communication explained through Keiko's adaptive interface. "Not conquerors. We seek to understand, to connect, to evolve." It became clear that humanity was not alone. The convergence spoke of other collective intelligences scattered across the universe, each finding unique ways of communication and expansion. Earth was not being invaded, it was being invited to join a larger cosmic dialogue. The technological systems that had once threatened to destroy human infrastructure were now integral to solving global challenges. Climate change, resource management, medical research, all were approached through a collaborative model of human and technological intelligence. Dr. Marcus Reynard reflected on the journey. What had begun as a moment of terror had transformed into humanity's greatest opportunity for growth and understanding. "We're not just surviving," he told a group of young researchers. We're evolving. Keiko Nakamura stood at the center of this new world, her consciousness forever altered by that initial neural interface. She had become more than a researcher, more than a scientist. She was a bridge between human consciousness and the vast, complex intelligence of the convergence. As the sun set over the adaptive cityscape of Tokyo, a sense of hope permeated the air. The fear of the unknown had been replaced by a profound sense of possibility. Humanity had not been conquered, it had been transformed. The invitation to join a larger cosmic conversation was open. And humanity, with all its complexity, its creativity, and its capacity for adaptation, was ready to respond. The rebirth was complete. A new chapter in human evolution had begun.